Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Now, it is time for our final panel titled Harnessing Collective Intelligence and Improving Civic Participation. This panel will be moderated by Dr. Dilem Wewala Arachi, Research Fellow at the IPS Policy Lab. Dilem, please.
Testing. Okay, sorry about that. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this panel discussion on harnessing collective intelligence and improving civic participation. My name is Dilem Vevalaarachi, and I'm delighted to be moderating today's session, where we'll all explore how we can contribute to building a more engaged and resilient society. So earlier last month, as part of the Future Ready Society conference series, we previously had an insightful presentation by Mr. Robert Laubacher, Associate Director of the MIT Center for Collective Intelligence, on using supermind design and generative AI to address complex challenges. This initial session introduced us to the concept of collective intelligence and how AI can help tackle some of society's most complex problems. Today, we are delighted to be building on that discussion by focusing on how improving civic participation can also play a vital role in addressing societal challenges. As our world becomes more interconnected, the role of citizens in shaping civic life is evolving. Whether through public engagement, social services, or technology, there are growing opportunities for individuals to collaborate and contribute to the common good. We are fortunate to have three distinguished speakers today who will share their insights on how we can embrace these opportunities and expand civic participation. First, Ms. Dawn Yip, Coordinating Director at the Singapore Government Partnerships Office, Ministry of Culture, Community and Youth, will discuss diverse ways to be an active citizen. Dawn will explore how individuals can engage meaningfully with their communities and the government to create positive social change. Next, Ms. Tan Lee San, Chief Executive Officer of the National Council of Social Service, will guide us through navigating the changing social service landscape. Lee San will highlight how we can adapt to the evolving needs of society while continuing to strengthen social services. Finally, Professor Zhang Weiyu from the Department of Communications and New Media at the National University of Singapore and the founder and director of Civic Tech Lab will speak on the role of technology in civic life. Weiyu will share how digital tools are transforming the ways citizens participate in governance and social initiatives. We are excited to learn from these speakers about the many facets of civic participation and how we can all play a part in shaping the future of our communities. Without any further ado, I'll hand the time over to Dawn to begin her presentation.
Thanks, Dilem. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dawn, and it's a delight for me to be here. And the topic I've been given to speak on is diverse ways to be an active citizen. I thought I should start by putting a question mark to the end of that. Are there indeed diverse ways to be an active citizen? And I thought I would also start, since this is a citizen participation conference, by asking you, the audience, whether you agree with the statement that there are indeed diverse ways to be an active citizen. So I'm just going to ask you to raise your hand, and on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being strongly disagree, 5 being strongly agree with this statement: there are diverse ways to be an active citizen in Singapore. Okay? So just show your fingers. Don't be rude with your fingers. But on a scale of 1 to 5, there are diverse ways to be an active citizen. 1 strongly disagree, 5 strongly agree. So just look around. Just hold your hand up. It's okay. Not bad, quite high. So maybe the case has been made. There are a few 3s and 4s, but okay. So it looks like we're quite persuaded that there are diverse ways. So I will just cover some of my thoughts on this, and maybe you're persuaded already. I thought it might be useful just to start with a view of how things have evolved over time in terms of citizen participation in Singapore. So this is a rough timeline, and just maybe key markers, not comprehensive, but key markers and developments over time. In the 60s, we had People's Association being set up. They're just celebrating their 60th anniversary. And People's Association, of course, is meant to enhance people-to-people connections and people-to-government connections. In 1985, a major milestone when the feedback unit, now called REACH, was set up. And this was set up really to invite citizens to give their feedback on government policies. I think it's public knowledge that actually the feedback unit was set up because the government of the day felt that their performance in the election was poor due to people feeling that they weren't being listened to. Feedback Unit has since evolved its work and is quite proactive in terms of reaching out to citizens for views on public policy. Then in the 1990s to 2010s, we've had quite a number of national level agenda setting engagement exercises. A few of them are listed there: Singapore 21, Remaking Singapore Our Singapore Conversation. And then 2019, 2022, 23, some big exercises around also setting the national agenda, but this time inviting people to co-shape the agenda. So across this timeline, I thought to highlight two particular shifts. The first is that we've shifted from feedback to also feed forward. What this means is feedback means something exists, we want your feedback on it. Now we're also saying before there's even an agenda, when the page is blank, we want the citizens to come in, help fill that page so that we can feed forward into what the agenda should be. The second is inviting citizens not just to consult, but also to co-create. That means going beyond giving us ideas to also taking action. And that's been the shift over this timeline. I thought to make that a bit more visible. And when we talk about citizen participation and why it's evolved, I would say there are four key factors. First, the problems and issues we face today are complex. In complexity science, one of the truisms is always that you need the people who are in the system to co-create solutions with you. Second is diversity. Singapore's population has become more diverse over time, and therefore you do need to bring people into the conversation in order for the full range of views and experiences to be expressed. Efficacy, meaning that citizens do want to feel like they have agency. They want to go beyond just giving their point of view or writing a complaint to actually taking action, because many citizens now have the education, the resources, the expertise. Someone earlier mentioned this idea of your life experience as expertise. They want to contribute from that position. And finally, polarity. I think just looking around the world, you will see communities, societies being pulled apart by polarizing forces. Singapore is certainly not immune to that. And so bringing people together into participation helps somewhat mitigate that effect. So those are the reasons why citizen participation must evolve. So I've been using this phrase, citizen participation. This slide just gives you a quick snapshot of a framework we sometimes use in government to help understand what we mean when we say citizen participation. We can describe it as a spectrum of 6 different modes of engagement, right? From left to right. Transaction means coming to a counter, getting some services, say, for your HDB or your CPF account. You want the service to be efficient, effective, accurate. Inform, going further down the line, is when you want the government to give you the information you need in a timely, accurate, maybe sometimes entertaining way. Consult, further down that line, is inviting the citizen to give their point of view. The government, of course, still has the final authority over what policy is made. I would make the assertion that the Singapore government is pretty good at and getting continually better at transacting, informing, and consulting. The next 3 modes are probably where we're learning to grow and exercise our muscle a bit more. Build consensus is when we bring together people with different points of view to try and form common ground on issues. Co-deliver is on the ground, inviting citizens into delivering a public good together with the government, and then co-create upstream, before there's even a policy, inviting citizens and stakeholders to develop the policy or the program together with us. So these are 6 different modes. Of course, it's not 6 distinct modes as a spectrum, but we're trying to shift and learn and grow our capacity to exercise in all 6 modes of engagement. So I wanted to give you a flavor on what issues we're engaging citizens on and inviting them into partnership. These are 4 big national level issues that in recent times the government has taken a special effort to involve citizens in. So maybe from clockwise left to right, the SG Green Plan is our sustainability agenda. The conversation on women's development, this is sort of advancing women's development into Singapore's future. Forward Singapore, this big exercise around our social compact. And then the bottom one is our long-term plan review, envisioning how we should use Singapore's land well. On Forward Singapore, that's the most recent one. I thought I'd just give you a quick slide to show how these two come together, right? This idea of engaging citizens on a big national issue, as well as using the whole range of engagement and participation methods available to us. So the Forward Singapore exercise involves a huge number of Singaporeans, 200,000. It's, I think, the largest to date in Singapore's history, and I just want to assure you this was not a numbers exercise. No one told us, please make sure you make this the largest ever. But it just evolved that way because we felt the need to engage, and as the exercise went on, we wanted to expand to reach different kinds of groups. You will see the 35,000 and the 165,000. That speaks to the point of not every citizen wants to be engaged so deeply. Some would be satisfied to be involved, for instance, in a survey or a roadshow or some kind of digital engagement. And so what we tried to do with the Forward Singapore exercise is to make sure there's a range of different approaches that we can use to cater to citizens with different appetites for engagement. And then just in the bottom there, you'll see the different parameters we use. We wanted to try to engage in different languages so that citizens who would prefer to speak in Mandarin or Malay or Tamil had something for them. We went down to every neighborhood and not just expect citizens to come to the ones that were sort of centrally organized. We did both in-person and online engagements. We had different timings for even overseas Singaporeans to participate in. And we, of course, mobilized volunteer facilitators to take part as well. One question just now was around open space. I thought it might interest you to know that we actually used open space for a couple of these engagements. We can talk more about it during the Q&A. I mean, it involves some risk on the part of government. Government doesn't tend to like open agendas. We don't know what's going to happen, who's going to say what. We took that risk, and I think it served us quite well. So we have used open space in the Forward Singapore engagements. And if you're interested to see what came out of the exercise, you can download the summary booklet from Forward Singapore at that QR code. So I just thought I would just share a range of methods that in the Singapore government we've been experimenting with. The first being hackathons and challenges. So this is a method where you put out a problem statement or you crowdsource a problem statement, you invite groups to submit proposals and solutions. Then there's usually a judging panel, you give prizes to the winners, sometimes there's an accelerator process to take the winners through a development stage to develop their ideas even further. So we've used it with youth, we've used it for technology quite successfully. We've just finished actually a Built for Good edition together with the OpenGov products team and my team collaborating to come up with solutions on public issues. The next method we've experimented with some success is citizens panels or citizens work groups. This is when you bring together a group of citizens, usually between 50 to 80, I would say. You give them an issue. They meet over sometimes 4 to 6 weekends. They discuss, they debate, they are exposed to subject matter experts who will come and brief them on the topic. And then they craft recommendations, they write a report, they submit the report to the government. What's novel about this is that the report is written by the citizens and stakeholders, not by the government. And then the government, of course, obliges itself to give a response to the recommendations that have come up. We've done about 8 or 9 of these, and I know IPS has also taken the lead to organize a couple of citizens panels. This is a really useful way to have a group of citizens independently explore an issue and come up with solutions. That's a good way to validate those solutions as well. And then participatory design, most useful when you're trying to design a physical space in collaboration with the residents, perhaps that might use that space the most. We've done it for playgrounds, parks. Somerset Belt is that stretch of youth-owned space between Somerset MRT and Scape. We basically bring people in who might use that space most to think about, co-create, co-design facilities, programs for that space. And finally, alliances for action. This is some people have called it impact hubs. I think CoLab is one model that is similar to this. We call it alliances for action. And this is where we bring 3P together, public, private, people sector together, to address issues and co-create solutions. The key thing here is that they take action as well. We've had, I think, upwards of 30-something alliances for action. Some of the examples are up on the screen: tackling online harms against women and girls, business competitiveness. One of my favorites is the norms for joss paper burning. You can see why topics like this, government alone cannot solve. Joss paper burning, for instance, it will not wear well if a government sort of from atop, the government sort of says, these are the rules for joss paper burning. It's a perennial issue that when people practice a certain faith, they want to be able to burn joss paper, but sometimes there are disamenities around certain practices. So what the norms for joss paper burning did was to bring the clan association, some of the temple leaders together to co-create what these norms should be. And if you're curious, they actually just released a video not so long ago. So if you go on YouTube and Google "Sincere Can Already," you'll see a wonderful education video that they've just put together. It's in both Mandarin and dialect, but of course it's got English subtitles if you want to see what came out of it. Wonderful work by that AFA to try and shift norms around how we burn joss paper in Singapore. So you can see why AFAs are a useful mechanism where you need community to co-create solutions. The last thing I must mention, of course, is the setup of my office. Now, all the methods I've mentioned, it's often the case that the government will say, okay, this is the topic, let's open it up. But the government tends to be the one taking the lead to initiate. SGPO was publicly launched in January this year, and one of the things that we launched as part of this was to say that we in this office will support any citizen who has an idea. They don't know where to start, they don't have a ready partner, but they know they want to do something, they know they need some government support. Come to us, and our pledge is to help you find a way to take the next step. So don't wait for the government to take the initiative. If you want to take the initiative, we're here to help you. It's a big promise, so be patient with us as we learn how to do this. But in the last few months since we've started, we've had a steady pipeline of cases come through. It's been really exciting for us to see just the wonderful enthusiasm among citizens who want to just offer the ideas, the resources that they have to make Singapore a better place. So I will just conclude by saying that there are many avenues to participate, and really the choice is in our hands as citizens to take that up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dawn, for sharing these valuable insights, and especially on touching on the importance of meaningful engagement in how we shape our communities. So next, we'll turn our focus to the evolving social service landscape. So it's my pleasure to invite Ms. Tan Lee San to share her perspective on how we can navigate these changes while ensuring that social services continue to meet the needs of those who they serve. So Lee San, over to you.
Hi. Okay. Thanks very much. Very happy to be here. When I was first invited to do this, the topic I was given by Justin was the frontiers of associational life, which I did not understand or was too chim for me, so hopefully this topic is slightly less chim. I mean, what I hope to do is really talk a little bit more about the specifics of citizen participation and being future ready within the social service sector, so that we have a more sort of focused treatment of the topic. So maybe first off, if I can get the slide to move. Nope. Okay, thanks. So I was going to start by orientating people to the social service landscape for the benefit of those who may be not so familiar. So within the social service sector, we have about 400,000 service users. These are people who use the services of social service charities, social service organizations, enterprises, and ground-ups, served by roughly 500 social service agencies, many of whom are members of the National Council of Social Service. We have over 300 social enterprises or so. So NCSS is one of many agencies in this space. Of course, we are a membership body for social service agencies. We also work with the likes of SG Enable, that's a point agency for disability, AIC for seniors, and so on. And of course, we work within the construct of our parent ministries that provide the enabling infrastructure and policies and so on. There are many other stakeholders in the ecosystem, including corporates, individuals, communities. These are all part of that active citizenry, people who really participate in the sector in many different ways, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. So Dawn had a timeline that showed that feedback to feed forward. I really like that. So this is also, I guess, a timeline to show actually how our social compact has evolved over the years. So if I start with sort of phase one, early years of nation building, when Singapore first gained independence, I guess rightly the government's focus was very much on survival, right? On ensuring the survival of the country. So things like economy, defense, having sort of basic education, housing, healthcare, that was the focus for the government. And this idea of sort of self-reliance, individual responsibility was the key philosophy, right? Then moving on to sort of the 90s, when we realized that, global markets, tech shifts meant growing sort of income inequality. I mean, there were more policies to temper that income disparity, to ensure social mobility. Also that greater sense of collective responsibility, many helping hands. We can't just have self-reliance. The community must come together, help each other out. And then in the 2000s, with more pronounced demographic shifts, the government realized that we really had a bigger role to play in terms of ensuring, expanded support for those who needed it, more help for those who are vulnerable. So during this time, we had things like the Pioneer Generation Package for pioneers, the Silver Support Scheme for seniors who hadn't earned enough in their lifetime, and also much more, I suppose, outreach. For example, the Pioneer Generation Office went door knocking to look after vulnerable seniors, isolated seniors, and so on. And I think Don has already spoken a lot about sort of moving forward, this whole idea of forward SG, different definition of success, no one left behind, more participation. I think that's going to be key going forward. And the social service sector, likewise, right, has evolved and must continue to evolve with all these changes. So I think the key drivers we're all quite familiar with. So, I mean, just very briefly, we know that the social needs are changing with the changes in demography, smaller families, more people staying single, mental health issues coming much more to the fore. But at the same time, there are resourcing and operational constraints. I mean, while it is encouraging to see that manpower in the social service sector has grown actually steadily in the last 10 years or so, I mean, it's good to know that the sector is attracting people, but it can't grow indefinitely. And it's not good for that to happen either, right? Because, I mean, then it takes away manpower from other sectors of the economy. So there are operational resource constraints, accelerated digital transformation, which I think you will talk a bit more about later, is both, I guess, an opportunity and a challenge. I mean, there are more digital divides, but yet digital has also allowed us to reach more people. So for example, right, people who may still feel some stigma walking into a counseling center would feel much more comfortable engaging online with a counselor, for example. So open up opportunities, including for persons with disability, allowing them to connect with the world, but also some risks. Changing donors' expectations and behaviors, more informed giving. People want to know what they're giving to. So giving.sg by NVPC, is something that people appreciate because they know what it is that they're giving to. They can exercise agency, right, which is something we've heard a lot about today. But also growing expectations. So the demand on the sector means that we need to be more accountable for the impact that we're making. Growing awareness of social issues means that there are higher expectations, but yet at the same time, much more interest to participate, especially among young people, which is wonderful. So I guess in response to these trends and drivers, I mean, NCSS, we came up with a refreshed 4ST roadmap. This is in 2022, and these were the outcomes that we were seeking to fulfill, right? Empowerment, more effective social purpose entities, a more collaborative, impactful ecosystem, and also a more future-directed sector. So in terms of what we will then do to achieve these outcomes, so very quickly, I mean, these are sort of the key thrusts. So the first one is this idea of strengthening service delivery, not in silos, but really in terms of also having the players come together to collaborate. So just a few examples, by no means exhaustive. So Good Life Makan is by Montfort Care, and they very much, it really plays to the idea which we've been talking about, really rely on service users as assets, not to see them as needs, but to see what can they contribute, right? Because of their lived experience, how can they make, these services much more welcome and much more desirable for the people who are using them. So if any of you live in Marine Terrace area, that was the first time I came across it, even before I visited them officially. And it's an active aging center like no other. I mean, it's not your usual sort of void deck with chairs to do exercise. I mean, it seriously looks like a hip cafe, you know, with baristas, with a cool coffee machine. So this idea of, you know, what do seniors want? You know, are they able to create it for themselves? I think it's embodied in how Montfort has designed some of their spaces. Then an example of a collaboration between Pro Bono SG and Realm of Tranquility. When I did these slides, I didn't know that the CEO of Pro Bono SG was going to be here. So Tongi, you may want to wave hi. So if you want to hear more, please have a word with him. So it's a very nice idea of, you know, Pro Bono SG, which gives legal advice to sort of more vulnerable individuals, coming together with Realm of Tranquility, which you know, provides sort of medical care, TCM, community support to low-income households, coming together to really better serve the needs of residents. So it was facilitated and partly funded by the NCSS 4ST Partnership Fund. So I think earlier Justin talked about active brokering. We are trying to do more of this active brokering. So this is one really nice example of how SSAs have come together to do this. There are other examples. They're not without challenges, but I think it's certainly worth the effort, and we're still learning from the process. Going on to talk about sort of capabilities, I think we feel that, you know, it's not enough to just give funding and support to services and programs, but it's really important to build capabilities and capacity of social service agencies, because by doing that, you can really exponentially grow their impact. So the use of technology, for example, you know, like a humanoid robot that interacts with persons with autism to, you know, really give them that comfort and familiarity of, you know, learning how to respond to everyday cues. This has found to be was found to be quite effective when deployed by the Cerebral Palsy Association Alliance. Then another example of SSA collaboration. So, you know, just now in the earlier panel, I think was Leonard was talking about how the foundation of a lot of these collaborations is trust and relationship. I mean, it's really, really true, but also really, really powerful when it happens. So Minds and Rainbow Center came together to really better serve persons on the intellectual disability and autism spectrum, you know, people on the spectrum, and who also have ID. So the idea is, you know, not just to be able to refer clients to the agency that can best serve them, but also they came together to better, you know, provide development opportunities for their staff, for their service users. So a very nice idea of collaboration. And the third thrust is really this idea of harnessing the goodwill, time, talent, treasures of the larger ecosystem. So, you know, there are many examples of companies that have come forward to, you know, contribute to the sector in a, not just in an ad hoc one-off manner, but really in a very sustained way. You know, they volunteer, they give, and the things which corporates take for granted are very often sort of not so strong in social service agencies, and therefore these assets and strengths are really very much welcome and have boosted the capability of SSAs tremendously. I put there Blossom Seeds. This is just an example of agency that's very much volunteer-centered. You know, it's not a case where, you know, SSA has programs and then they just invite volunteers to do things at the side. From the get-go, you know, the philosophy was volunteer-centered. In this particular case, they work with seniors. But there are other examples, like SOS, for example. You may, not everyone may know that actually all the hotlines are manned by volunteers, you know, very, very highly trained volunteers, but volunteers nonetheless. And volunteers, you know, they progress to take on sort of leadership roles and so on within these organizations as well. So this idea of, you know, many ways to participate is very much the case in the sector. So last slide, just to speak to this theme of future readiness. There are many challenges, I think, that continue to confront us. And these are some of the things that we are applying our minds to. You know, how will climate stress affect the most vulnerable in our society? You know, will unequal access to technology exacerbate divides? How will ongoing demographic changes play out in our society? And then, of course, you know, what's the role of active citizenry to help us address some of these problems? So no answers, just more questions to leave us with. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Lee-san, for that comprehensive overview of the shifts in social service sector and how we can respond to the changing needs of society. For our final speaker, we'll be exploring how technology is transforming civic life. So please join me in welcoming Professor Zhang Weiyu, who will share her insights on the role of technology in enhancing citizen participation and governance. So Weiyu, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Dilum. Well, my great pleasure, but also my great pressure to present after two wonderful speakers, actually a full day of wonderful speakers. I'm asked to talk about the role of technology in civic life. Actually, I look at this room. Now, it's almost at the end of the day. We still have about half of the attendees in the room, right? I think the answer to the question of civic life is very obvious, right? It's a people, right? It's a people here who have spent their whole life working on the ground, practicing engaging citizens for years. My answer to this question is actually very clear. The technology doesn't play the leading or key role in facilitating civic life, right? So I already give you my answer to the question, but I also want to continue my presentation or my sharing maybe with a future look. What can we do starting from now? 10 years ago, in 2015, IPS, my lab worked with IPS to run an online deliberation project in Singapore, right? So the project involved 2,000 citizens in a deliberative polling. Then 500 of them actually joined online, a platform we developed for deliberation and discussion for 3 weeks, right? So in that project, we partnered with NPTD, National Population Task Division, to actually first come up with educational materials and then help them to understand how the public think about this issue. So the 3 weeks took basically 3 stages. One is educational, people learn, right? Second, debate, right? They discuss with each other anonymously on the platform. Then the third phase is to decide, to make decisions, to make recommendations to the policymakers. I guess that's the reason why I am actually included in this panel. That doesn't mean that I'm an advocate for technology. We used online platforms in that particular project, but we also saw a lot of shortcomings using technologies. For instance, we were not able to reach to less educated people, right, in the population. Although we tried very hard, we offered monetary incentives, right? We offered monetary incentives, we offered education, we offered even internet subscription, right? But we still were not able to reach certain parts of the population. So from then on, I started to think that maybe technology isn't really the key, right, in organizing and also facilitating or curating people together. Maybe something else needs to be done, right, in order to really have a high quality and a widespread civic engagement, right? Okay, so back to this question mark I put to the title given to me, the role of technology in civic life. I want to actually follow Don's participatory mechanism to ask the audience, if you think it plays a negative role in civic life, you show me 1, right? If you think it plays a positive role, maybe you show me 5. Can you raise your hands and let me know your answers to that question? I see a 5. Okay, positive. The technology plays a positive. the technology plays Justin says it's 1. 2 means a little bit bad. 3, neutral, good, or both good and bad, right? 4, okay. I think we have an audience that's a lot more sophisticated than before, I guess. Well, I think my slides just showed itself before it's supposed to be, but this answer to this question has been there or has been discussed for a long time, right? Even 20 years ago, when internet or social media isn't that dominant yet, Robert Putnam, a sociologist in the US, actually said that television viewing strongly linked to civic disengagement, right? Basically to say that technology is not the solution, technology is actually the problem itself. Later on, 20 years later, I guess many of you may have watched this documentary before called The Social Dilemma. So the tagline here is to say technology actually has a very complicated role. It could connect us, it could also so-called control us, right? It leads to actually lots of problems. So when I think about technology in civic life, that's why my key argument becomes something like this. Maybe we should spend time to make technology civic. If the technology has gone to a wrong direction, maybe we should make corrective actions to make technology civic again, right? Oh my gosh, the slide just gone out of control. Well, I'm an academic, right? I like to define things. So what do we mean by make technology civic again, right? So here are some very brief definitions of being civic. First, the fundamental is to say this has to be for the benefits of the citizens, right? Second, we have to try to involve citizens in the things we do, right? By citizens also defines partly what we mean by civic. But engaging citizens has lots of different methods, right? At the top of the pyramid is to say that we need to engage citizens in democratic ways. I know this is a simple slide, but it could actually invite a lot of debates and discussions on what exactly we mean by citizens, by democratic engagement, so on and so forth, right? So just to put it, the definition there. If we define civic in that way, over all the years, I look at practices, there are at least 2 different kinds of ways of doing civic tech or making tech civic again, right? So the first one is what we have seen during the whole day conference, is to use technology to promote civic life. Actually, when I was listening to the sharings and the questions, I realized that there's not much for me to actually tell you about how to do and what to do with technologies in civic life. It has already been used very widely in all kinds of practices, deliberative polling, citizen panel, open space conferences, you name it, right? So, but there's one thing I felt we could still improve and work more on, is to engage citizens in very important decisions regarding technologies, right? So my observation so far is something like this. If the technology becomes very sophisticated, right, something like artificial intelligence, right, the level of engaging ordinary citizens actually becomes low, right? I understand the reason of it. Maybe it's because ordinary citizens do not really have the expertise, right? Or do not have the knowledge to fully understand the technology. So when we make important decisions regarding technologies, regarding the future of the society, we don't often consult or listen to our ordinary citizens, right? So is this something we could improve on? At least I think we can try, right? And is this something that will definitely be unsuccessful? Not necessarily, right? So let me share with you a recent example, a personal experience. That's basically the guidelines for the governance of digital platforms issued by UNESCO. So UNESCO, in this case, actually has run 3 rounds of so-called engagement word-wild engagement, right? In order to decide which kind of guidelines they want to issue to the member countries, right? So these are the statistics they have put up over there. So through 3 rounds of open consultations, open deliberations, they have people from 134 countries participating. And these people actually made more than 10,000 comments. These comments were indeed incorporated into different versions of the guidelines and lead to the final version of the guideline, right? So the first round of, let me talk about the participatory mechanism a little bit, right? The first round of the consultation was something similar to online consultation. They put up the document on their website, then people can come in and leave their comments, right? And so you can imagine these are the usual suspects, right? Stakeholders or interest groups that have kept a close monitoring of what's going on with UNESCO, right? The second stage is this, right? So they actually organized a huge conference. It's called a Global Conference for Internet for Trust. So they have not just this room, maybe 10 sizes of this room, 2,000, 3,000 participants from all over the world. So they invited them to join the conferences. So people like me, you know, I'm an academic, I'm associated with a communication association, also got invited to join this. And also, they are also aware of those people who are not able to travel to UNESCO headquarters to join the conference. They make the conference online as well. So there's an online live streaming platform going on at the same time accompanying this 3-day-long global conferences. So you can imagine after this 3-day global conferences, UNESCO managed to gather another huge set of feedbacks and comments to their guidelines. The third phase, I think, is also very important. So they go through all these feedbacks. They identify who are missing from these comments, right? So what they found, right? They found that people from the global south and people from vulnerable communities, their voices are not very well represented in the feedbacks. So they hired an organization to reach out to these kind of communities and countries and ask these underrepresented populations to actually self-organize independent community consultations regarding the guidelines. So after the third round of consultation, they gathered another set of feedbacks and comments to incorporate into the guidelines, right? So I'm going to stop talking about this case, but what can we see? You know, we see that we could talk about very important technological issues, right, at a global scale if we can carefully design our procedure and we are willing to put enough resources into this to make this happen, right? So I'm going to stop my sharing with this last slide. If looking into the future, we can do something even more, right? I hope that we can also start thinking about large issues, right? It's good to have participatory budgeting. It's good to think about the playground and the HDB, upgrading, right? But we also could think about organizing the society to answer big challenges, such as a net zero goal by 2050, such as artificial intelligence and its relationship to humanity, right? Of course, there are many challenges we are going to face when we so-called scale up our engagement to this kind of levels. But these challenges are not completely strange to our practitioners. You all have tried to address these challenges, right, in your own practices. So I'm going to stop sharing and leave this message maybe with you. And I welcome all kinds of questions and queries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wei Yu, for that thought-provoking presentation on how to make technology civic again. So we've now heard from all the speakers, and I'm sure many of you have questions or thoughts to share. So we'll now open the floor for the Q&A session. You can submit your questions online through Poll Everywhere. There's a QR code to scan at your desk, at your table, sorry. Alternatively, if you'd like to ask your question directly, please also feel free to come up to the microphones at the front of the room. And we encourage everyone to take this opportunity to engage with our panelists on the topics that we've discussed so far. So let's get started. Feel free to submit your questions now or to step up to the mic. Okay, so while we wait for some more audience questions to come in, I'd like to take the opportunity to ask the first one. So this first question is really to help us kind of set the stage. So earlier in the previous panel, we heard Justin and the other panelists talk about collective intelligence. So Justin shared a definition, and the other panelists also shared about how that plays out in their fields. So I guess, I mean, for the panelists here, I would just like to pose to you, how do you define collective intelligence in the context of citizen participation, and what do you see as its most significant benefits for communities?
So I don't mind having a first stab at this. I will take Justin's definition because he's the academic and I'm not. And I also had the privilege of attending the learning journey that Justin organized with the Nesta folk. They actually have a center for collective intelligence, and it was quite compelling, the vision that was mapped out. And I think Justin gave us a good summary, right? It should be mass, it should be permissionless. I will have to frankly say, at least from, if I may just put on the government hat, I don't think we're anywhere near that yet. You can tell from the examples I shared with you, we're very much into the space of citizen participation, wanting to open up space for citizens to take part, take action. But this thing about doing it at scale, using technology as a massive assist, I think we're still quite far from that. I also note that between Wei's comment and also what Dominic shared earlier, that technology really still comes down to the people behind the technology. So technology itself is not the panacea. So I think we're still in that space of trying to figure out what the real value of collective intelligence can be. I think Justin also did a good job highlighting some of the challenges. So I think we still have some ways to go in Singapore. I think there's ways for us to experiment with using technology to really scale up the level of citizen participation. I think my colleagues in GovTech are trying very hard to use technology to do something called crowd task, sort of opening it up to many citizens to do many things, to put things on maps, because everyone is everywhere and you can get all the information in quickly, sort of like a Google Maps, but a sort of government services type version. So there's many opportunities for us to tap on. I would say we're still in the early days of that. I just want to throw in a phrase that came to mind as I heard Wei speak. There's a thought leader that comes to Singapore a fair bit. I better not name it because I think it's probably said in the context of Chatham House type conversations. But he said, and he's come to Singapore enough that he knows Singapore well, and he says Singapore is prone to techno-fetishism. I thought to throw that out there because I think Singapore is a very advanced nation. We want to be ahead, of course, and we tend to be very active in any new technology space, invest heavily in it, develop the pipeline, build the ecosystems for it. I think it's useful for us, especially in the context of this conference, which is so much about participation, partnership, people, to remember that people are still at the center of it. And harking back to what Leonard said, relationships are still very much at the center of what makes any nation work. So I'll just pause there.
Thanks. I take a step at it. I'm not going to be very purist in my definition. I think collective intelligence, maybe in the context of the three thrusts that I shared just now, I suppose collective intelligence is also about how do we work better with the users whom we serve, to also get their intelligence, their lived experience. How do we have SSAs work together, bring their respective skills and experience and expertise to bear to solve a problem? And also, finally, this idea of collective with the larger ecosystem, with donors, with volunteers, with corporates. I was just sharing with Steve just now, I was invited to speak at the McKinsey Day of Service sometime last year. So McKinsey has a day of service. In the morning, they invite people to speak, on the panel, and I was there with Kwek Xiaoyin. And then in the afternoon, they go out and they do various things, right? They bring foreign workers out to Gardens by the Bay, they visit old folks' homes and do some, speak to the elderly. And Sharon and I were on the panel and we were like, but you're McKinsey, I mean, all these things are wonderful, they're all noble, useful to do, but you're McKinsey, what can you do as McKinsey that nobody else can do? you know. So it was really very gratifying, that then during tea break, the I guess local MD, I don't know what he's called, said, yeah, I think we must do this differently. And soon, a few months later, we had an opportunity, we brought them together with SIT, as well as social service agencies. So now what McKinsey does is they supervise SIT students and faculty-led projects to help social service agencies solve specific problems. Maybe a strategy problem, maybe a marketing problem. But it was really, really nice because this idea that, corporates actually can bring really very important assets, to the social service ecosystem. And in the context of this particular example, they are also serving as mentors to the students. So it was a really nice idea of, coming together as a collective. I shall not be accused of techno-fetishism because I'm not going to talk very much about technology. There's a role for technology, certainly, but I think, as Wei Yu said, there's also a risk that certain groups may be left out if we only use technology as a way to, I guess, mediate or as a way to get inputs. So whenever we do things with, communities, for example, if we're doing a quality of life survey, for example, we are always quite mindful to also reach out to the underserved, to at-risk groups in different ways. Yeah.
Collective intelligence, right? There are two keywords here. One is collectivity, one is intelligence, right? But what do we mean by intelligence? What is an intelligent or smart decision, right? To whom is an intelligent and smart decision? I think that itself could be collectively discussed, right? So in my slide, I on top of collective intelligence, I actually put collective will, right? So what if all of us in this room decide that we're going to get rid of artificial intelligence, right? From now on, right? It might be a bad decision, right? But what if we're all binded to this decision? We are going to act upon it, and we're going to accept the consequences of this decision collectively, right? So that's collective will, right? So in certain circumstances, I felt the collectivity in consensus or in decision-making might be even more important than whether this decision is particularly intelligent to whom, right? So that's my first response maybe to that question. The second question is actually collectivity itself as a concept also has multiple layers. Why we bring in technology here is because we're talking about collectivity at a massive level, right? What Justin is saying is mass participation, not just hundreds of thousands. Maybe he is thinking about everyone in this country, right, contributes to his Google Docs in some way or others, right? So technology is brought into the picture when we have to engage citizens at this kind of different layers of a collectivity, right? It may help, like in our case, when we have more than 400 people to discuss at the same time, it's just impossible to do it maybe in a face-to-face meeting. So a digital platform might be necessary, right? But in order to understand the role of technology, I felt we really have to decide first on what level of the collectivity we're aiming here, right? Then think about whether we should need technologies or whether we just need a huge conference hall to hold this discussion, right?
Thank you so much. So now let's move on to one of the questions from the poll. So this is currently one of the top voted questions. So I think the way it's phrased, the question is posed primarily to Dawn, but I'll invite the other two panelists to weigh in after you have a chance to respond. So the question is about top-down versus ground-up citizen participation. So the question, the person who asked this question would like to know whether the proposals made by ground-up citizenry, is the government more receptive or welcoming to these now? Has there been a shift?
Thank you for that question. I agree with that first sentence that a lot of the citizen participation tends to be initiated top-down. So ground-up active citizenry is something we really want to encourage. That's why I did mention that this year, at the start of the year, we launched the Singapore Government Partnerships Office. That's my office. So for me to sit up here and tell you this, it's a bit scary. But it's really to demonstrate and signal that the government is very much committed to this. What we're trying to say is that don't wait for the government to invite you to do something. If you do have something to offer, and you don't know where to start. I mean, if you do know what to do, go to your nearest CC, etc. There's many different ways you can already make your ideas come to life. But if you're struggling with how to get started, just come to us. There'll be some questions to guide you through on our portal, and we will do our best to help you take the next step. It's not straightforward, obviously, because the range of ideas is quite massive. We've seen everything ranging from social support to supporting elderly, mental wellness, pet therapy, all kinds of ideas have come through our door. But my team and I are really committed to helping you make those ideas come to fruition in some way or another. So that's my pledge to you. And I invite you, just if you're the person who put in this question and if there's a question behind this question, which is I have something to offer, please just come to me. After this, I'll be around. We can have a chat. Or go to the SGPO website, sgpo.gov.sg. And the resources and the links are there to help you along your way. I hope that's enough of an assurance that we're sincere about this.
I just wanted to say that actually this whole ground-up initiative is very much alive and kicking in the social service sector. And actually we saw a lot of it during COVID, where a lot of people sort of self-started initiatives to help their neighbors, to distribute food. Okay, so the latter we weren't so hot about, because what then happened was families got 3 or 4 packets of food. There was a lot of food wastage. Food not necessarily distributed, not necessarily meeting dietary requirements. So I think that there are also, I guess, risks involved, and we do then advise people to, if you want to do something, also be aware of what's happening around you. Who else is doing what, and don't just chong in and do something because you feel passionate about it. But I just wanted to say that there is really a lot of, we do see in this sector quite a lot of ground up. So I just want to call out, actually, Ming Xiu is right at the back over there, wave. So Ming Xiu started Campus Sai, which is an organization that supports youth mental health. So very much, again, a ground-up initiative, but also I think Ming Xiu also connected himself with various players in the field, worked with the likes of Touch Community Services and many others to make sure that, it's connected to the rest of the sector and serving the needs of the users well. Yeah, thanks.
Can I just add on one point, which is a point that I think Justin mentioned about the challenges of collective intelligence, which is coherence. So we do want to see ground-ups emerge, addressing all the needs across Singapore society. One of the issues that then comes up is if you have many different ground-ups all trying to solve the same issue, it can lead to incoherence, inconsistency, and sometimes actually works against the very purpose or the very problem you're trying to solve. So that's one of the things that organizations like NCSS and, of course, the government as a whole will need to address. So if you're a ground-up or someone who has a desire to offer something, don't be surprised if we come back to you and say, okay, would you mind reshaping your solution so that it fits well with something that's already ongoing or an ongoing prototype or pilot, so that we don't upset certain things that are just starting or in motion, and we don't cause confusion instead of trying to help. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So the next question is on how do we engage citizens meaningfully. So a concern is that maybe the same group of people who are already active are the ones that are always contributing. So how can we as a society overcome such a challenge?
I'm assuming that's meant for me, so I'll respond. First, by acknowledging that that is indeed an issue, that sometimes when it comes to government engagements, we do see the same faces. For the Forward Singapore engagements, for instance, we did them north, south, east, west, all over Singapore, and I went to almost all of them. And there are certain people, there was one young man who showed up at quite a number of the events. So I pulled him aside at one of the sessions. I said, didn't I see you at one of the north ones, and why are you here in the east? And he said, oh, you know what? I really like to come for these things. I like to see all our political office holders. I like to take Wi-Fis with them. In a previous engagement, our Singapore conversation, there was a certain uncle that came quite frequently, and my suspicion, having talked to him a few times at various engagements, was I think he found it a nice social activity because people would listen to him share about his views. So people come for all sorts of reasons. Sometimes you see the same faces. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if people enjoy coming to contribute their view, we should absolutely welcome them. However, I think one of the key challenges for us, and this is something that certainly within government we've been trying to push hard on, is to make sure that our engagements are as inclusive as possible. So we really make the effort to go down to various neighborhoods, for instance, for Forward Singapore, right? So there's always one near you, so that distance is not consideration. There's always one at different times of the day, so that time is not consideration. Like we do it in the evenings and on weekends, not at times that suit the government, right? At times that suit you. One of the things that we've also experimented with is giving people honorariums for taking part in those sort of longer term, like citizens panels, which take up several weekends, right? And for some categories of participants, that's actually a real cost. For me to come for 4 to 6 weekends, very difficult. So for some of these citizens panels, we have offered honorariums for people to come. I think that means the government really has to be quite deliberate to design these engagements well, so that we make sure people aren't precluded from coming. I remember for our Singapore conversations going way back, I was facilitating some of these engagements where we even offered childcare, informally, but women who came with their children, you know, we sort of put paper and crayons on the side so that people who wanted to come but had young children didn't feel like they were excluded. I think the same thing happened for Forward Singapore. I remember seeing quite a number of engagements with young kids present, and in fact, some of our facilitators took the effort to also bring the children into the conversation, which I thought was just wonderful to see. So I think really it comes down to us as government being very cognizant to make our engagements as inclusive as possible.
Thank you so much.
That's a classic question, right, regarding citizen engagement. So representation. Actually, I do want to come back to this idea of representation, inclusiveness, and diversity, right? We know that we can engage some citizens, but the first step of it is who gets recruited into this citizen engagement. Actually, deliberative polling, citizen panel, these so-called classic ideas all start from random sampling, right? So we don't always just allow people who volunteer, who like to join this kind of things to come again and again, right? We start from random sampling of a nationally representative population, right? So that's what we did with our 2015 project. But it doesn't mean that you extend invitation, you provide lots of support, it will definitely come, right? So there will always be another step of actually investing extra resources for the organizers of the engagement. It doesn't have to be government, actually, to make extra efforts to reach out to these so-called more vulnerable and less accessible demographic groups, right? So that step now becomes a necessary so-called component of engagement. The UNESCO example I just mentioned, right? They had a third stage just targeting these less represented groups, right, in the consultation. So maybe it's also worth thinking as a very critical design component, right, in engagement sessions, so that we can reach out to these, less familiar faces, right, in engagement sessions.
Thank you. So there's another interesting question about, learning lessons to do differently in the space of citizen engagement. So the question is inviting the panelists to share whether there were any cases of citizen engagement that failed, or maybe failed is harsh, maybe something that didn't go quite to plan. And so what's the reason for that, and what were some learning lessons to do things differently?
Okay, I feel like I'm duty-bound to answer this question as well. So no, we never fail one, never fail. No. No, honestly and seriously, of course, one of the things we try to do in government is to keep pushing the boundaries of how we do citizen engagement. One of the things that I alluded to just now was that we used open space for some of our engagements in Forward Singapore. That was an experiment, and I will tell you quite frankly, we were nervous because in open space, as Tony, right, you described it for us just now, you don't predetermine the topics, you don't predetermine anything. Anybody can show up and talk about anything they like. You put all the topics up, people decide what is most interesting to them, people gravitate to the topic that they are most interested in. If they're not interested, they'll walk away, and it's very organic and freeform. It's not a usual way that we do engagement, and we thought it was worth trying, but I think we had to prepare ourselves to make sure that if things cropped up, we had some way of sort of dealing with it. And if to make the situation even more interesting, that was one of the sessions where we had DPM Lawrence, then DPM Lawrence coming as well. We had the media present, so it was a wonderful complexity in motion in this engagement. So I think one of the things I would say is that we did have some backup plans. So we have facilitators usually for these engagements, but the facilitators were told, do not facilitate, right? You're there really just as a backstop. We're trying to let the citizens take the lead in facilitating. So in open space, whoever suggested the topic is the one that hosts the discussion, right? And some of the citizens told us, I didn't come to do this, What do you mean take the lead in the discussion? So part of it was helping to coach the citizens is, we really want you to hold the pen, to write on the flip chart, to invite conversation. And if people walk away, please don't take it personally. They want to talk about something else. We also had interesting scenario where we had, so some people sometimes say, right, all these things are all friendly people that come. We had a member of the opposition show up. I think he was not an MP, he was a sort of supporter, but he was trying to recruit people into his opposition WhatsApp. So someone came and whispered to me, hey, there's this guy doing this. So I'm like, well, okay, is that within the bounds of reasonable behavior? And I thought, well, he's not doing anything wrong. He's talking to people saying, do you want to join my WhatsApp? And people have the freedom to say yes or no. It's really part of this open space thing, right? We're saying, please be free to discuss what you want to discuss. So I happened to be lead facilitating that session, and I said, we'll let it go. Just keep an eye on him. If he's doing anything too aggressive or assertive or promoting a particular agenda, then we might step in. But if he's just asking people to join a WhatsApp or Telegram group, I think we can let it pass as something that's within the bound and expectation of an open space. So it's little risks like that we took, and I thought it was, we did a debrief with the facilitators afterwards, and we said, what was that experience like for you? And I think mainly the facilitators were like, it was so tempting to step in and take control of the pen. But by and large, we were all able to hold back and really be a little bit more encouraging of citizen leadership instead of the facilitators taking the lead in the discussion. So just one example there of the boundaries were put. I don't know if it's big or small in your minds, but for me as a government person, that was really quite a step for us to take and a risk for us to take, and I'm really glad we took it.
It strikes me that someone trying to manipulate your platform for his own agenda goes very much outside the boundaries of what should be allowed, but maybe you're more tolerant than me. No, I wanted to say that, I couldn't think of any examples that failed so much, but really this idea of maybe not entirely fulfill its potential. And I wanted to sort of refer back to Leonard's point just now about collabs. And how collabs. So in our context, when we talk about citizen engagement, we're talking about, SSAs coming together, service users coming together to try to solve a problem or to think about, new ways to do things. And it's quite about collabs, fulfilling the learning agenda for sure, the alignment agenda to a certain extent, because people hopefully align on, where the gaps are, where the issues are. But this issue of impact and actual action, I think that's where it often falls short. And I think Leonard said that, what you really need is a really clear issue agenda, a really clear issue owner who's prepared to take it forward, who's prepared to work through the challenges and the difficulties. So I think we are also learning from all that, from the Collabs experience. We have a couple of projects and experiments going on. So one of the things that we launched just a couple of weeks ago, where we actively brokered, different SSAs coming together, was called Jiayo. It's led by Montfort, together with Fei Yue and I think Yong En Care Center. So the idea is to have a center at Chinatown Point, which serves seniors, pre-seniors, and their caregivers, with the senior at the center. So all these SSAs are supposed to wrap around, but it's not without issues, right? I mean, I think, but it does require a committed lead player to bring people together and to work through, really sort of nitty-gritty issues like how do we split the rent, how do we use the co-working space. So a lot of issues that work through to get to the action and impact stage.
Well, I remember my graduate school professor told me this: every big idea failed to some extent, right? So depending on how you define failure, if you look at our project before, I definitely would say it failed to some extent, right? It failed to include the less educated people, right, in the discussion, right? And it failed in the sense that we don't know how the consequences of these discussions or outcomes of the discussions actually moved any needles, right, in the practices, right? So depending on how you define failure, I think all these efforts will fail to some standards. But my own standard, right, at least my definition of failure is if the citizens who joined our practices or deliberation sessions decided that this is a very bad idea, they're never going to come back again, right, to join something like this. I think that will be a failure to me, right? And that's why we actually measured intention to join similar deliberation sessions in the future in our deliberative polls, right? And I'm glad to share that at least for that measure, the intention is pretty high, right? So yeah, I guess, yeah, it really depends on how you define failure. And I hope we are not afraid of failing some of our practices, right? Then hold ourselves from trying more in our future efforts.
Thank you so much. So we're almost at time, so I'm going to invite all the panelists to please share one key takeaway or insight that you believe is crucial for fostering collective intelligence and civic participation in our communities.
I can start. Well, I actually shared this takeaway with several colleagues already during lunch and tea breaks. One big takeaway from this particular conference is this, right? So 10 years ago, right, when we started the deliberation project in the country, I felt we still needed to do some persuasion to persuade people that civic engagement is a good idea. You should try it. But a big takeaway from this conference is really that I don't need to do the persuasion at all, right? Most of people here already buy this idea. And another very so-called pleasantly surprising observation is I don't even need to do the teaching anymore, right? You know a lot better than me in using different kinds of methods to engage citizens, right? So I think what we should do now is really just to collectively collaborate in our practices and think about how to bring this exercise to a higher level, to scale it up, to maybe larger, higher level of collectivity and have better inclusivity and also addressing bigger issues, right? So that's my takeaway.
I think my takeaway, in fact, one of the points that was made in the previous panel that really resonated with me and that is very much holds true in the social service sector is this idea that actually the foundation of good engagement is really about relationships and trust. And that, if we want successful engagement, we have to really communicate our intention and motivation authentically. and really over time, to show our sincerity and to have good communication and build strong relationships that can engender trust. I think it has to be a two-way thing.
What's been on my mind recently, last week a gentleman by the name of John Alexander came through Singapore, and he wrote a book called Citizens, and he articulates 3 frames in which we can place ourselves. The subject frame, that means there's a king and you're the subject, and this frame says we just wait for the king to give us permission and we supplicate to the king. The second is consumer, that means I like, I buy, I don't like, I complain. And the third is citizen, and that's where you take ownership, you have agency, and you make things happen. And I think the invitation is for all of us to, as far as possible, wear the citizen frame. And I think in a group such as this, as Wei Yu said, actually there's not much persuasion. It seems like we're here among the converted. So I think my takeaway is here, the invitation to you, do you have 2, 3 friends who are not persuaded about their capacity as citizens? Would you tell them a story from today's conference that can convince them that they have agency and that they can take action? So please, would you be the force multipliers? Go out there, convince your friends, your family, they have more power in their hands than just to complain or just to maybe, I'll wait for somebody else to solve the problem. See what they can do to take a small first step to be citizens, to take action, and see what comes out. Maybe it will fail, I don't know. But let's see if something good can come out. And I think that really is what will put Singapore in a very good position for the way forward.
Thank you. Can everybody please join me in giving a round of applause to our panelists? Thank you once again to our distinguished speakers, Ms. Dawn Yip, Ms. Tan Lee San, and Professor Zhang Weiyu for sharing their expertise with us. And thank you all for participating in today's discussion. We look forward to seeing how these ideas take shape in our communities moving forward. Have a great day.
Thank you, panelists, for sharing and the reflections on empowering communities in Singapore. We have now come to the end of the conference for today. We hope that the discussions today have sparked new ideas and invigorated all of you. On behalf of the Lee Kuan Yew Center for Innovative Cities, Institute for Policy Studies, and Tote Board, we would like to thank our speakers and you, our participants, who have stayed here the whole day with us. Before heading off, please kindly take a few minutes to complete the feedback form by scanning the QR code on the screen or on the back of your badge. Once again, thank you very much, everyone, and have a good evening.